Right, Gadge,
Tom.
welcome back to the AATV studio.
Always good to be back. It's been a while.
So we're going to talk today about the best bang for buck historical replicas for retro airsoft.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get going.
So I think for me, Tom, obviously when we were at Airsoft Action magazine, every month I had to ferret around for some new loadout, and it was quite easy to get the kit quite often. You know, you could get a set of old Yugoslavian combats or whatever for 30 or 40 quid on eBay. Getting the replicas was really difficult, so I had to make sure that everything I chose to do worked around the replica I had, unless I could beg or borrow one from JD Airsoft or something like that, you know. And without a shadow of a doubt, drum roll please, I think, number one in most useful airsoft gun I've ever had is the AKMS folding stock AKM. So this is a full stock version, but the point remains the same. So I reckon with one of these you can do pretty much everything from Vietnam War all the way up to 2010 era Russian troops.
And probably modern
guerrilla fighters.
Guerrilla fighters, should we call it?
Yeah.
Modern guerrilla fighters.
The regular warfare.
This particular replica we've used for Vietnam, Mujahideen, Soviet airborne in Afghanistan. We've used it for
private security.
Private security.
Yeah.
So this one is done from, what, 1960 through to 2020.
I mean, it's a ubiquitous rifle in the real world.
Yeah.
They're great in airsoft. Like, also, that's the great thing about it. You get one of these, especially you get a really good one like an LCT or an E&L, and not only do they look great, and you can do tons of different loadouts with them, but they work as well. You know, it's not like one of those, oh, it's a cool niche gun, it fits my loadout, but it's a bit pants.
Yeah. So the one I would probably go for is the AKM with the folding stock. If you do get one, you want an AKM, which was the type with the stamped metal receiver and not the earlier type with the forged. And you'll know because the little divot on the side is smaller, effectively. And that was the modernised version of the AK. And there's more of those than there are the original machine version.
Actual true AK-47s are quite rare beasts.
Very few of them indeed. So this is my LCT. I've had it for years. It's done a sterling job on the airsoft field as well as in our loadout videos. They're now quite expensive. SEMA do one which is fairly cheap. This one, the LCTs are now a bit harder to get and a bit more expensive, but I think they're worth it. The external quality is exceptional. Yeah.
I mean, it's only the fact that modern Russian and sort of Russian area forces tend to be using polymer furniture now.
Not at the moment, Gadge.
Well, not at the moment, no.
I've seen plenty of pictures of these in use.
Well, there you go. So I'm proven wrong. Actually, you could probably still do a modern loadout with this. Then, yeah, there you go.
Yes. So moving on, let's try another replica. Gadge, this is my M16A1 carbine.
It's an M4, isn't it?
It's going to make me bite. So the M16A1 carbine or a M653 is the kind of Colt model number. Yeah. Now these were used from just after Vietnam right up until First Gulf War. If you're going to do a Special Forces loadout, retro Special Forces loadout, this is probably the most ubiquitous carbine you can get. There are variations with different receiver types and different barrels that were used later on, so the M16A2 carbines. The early M16A2 carbines looked like this anyway, so you could get away with one of these being used for a Black Hawk Down.
Well, I was going to say, for what we do in film sim, if you turned up to a Vietnam event I was running and used that as an XM177, etc., I wouldn't turn you away.
There are some small modifications, which I will go through in a minute. They were also used by British forces. So they were used by the SBS, 148 battery, SBS, various jungle warfare cadres, certainly the Royal Marines, mountain warfare cadres. All of those guys also use them as well. So you can use them for US, UK. It's an extremely flexible carbine.
And it's a very classic AR carbine silhouette, isn't it, at the end of the day? As we said, there might be a slightly different barrel or flash suppressor, but essentially, I wouldn't mind using that as a stand-in on loadouts where it didn't quite fit as well. I'm pretty sure you could use that as an M4 if you had to.
Yeah, well, early M4s, XM4s had a fixed carry handle. Yeah. 653s were also the guns used by Barnes
Oh, in Platoon, yes.
And Elias
yeah.
and Platoon, because they
Yeah.
didn't have XMs.
I think
Now,
someone picked us up on that in a video and went, yes, we know.
we know, that was the whole point. We did actually say, right, so me being an ex-engineer and nerd, I 3D printed this XM flash hider for this gun.
Nice.
And I shall just swap it over.
And hey presto, you're Vietnam-tastic now.
So this one's sleeved to just in front of the flash ports. So it reduces the barrel length down to an XM.
Yeah.
So I've got a Vietnam carbine as well, Gadge.
Yeah.
These are available for sale. Get in touch, I can make you one. This is a GMP custom build.
Yeah.
So expensive. SEMA do a version of this. I think E&C also do a version of this. They're quite cheap now. You can get them for around £200. Obviously not a custom built GMP. And you've got an incredibly flexible Special Forces carbine.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think if you can't get one of this model, just having a AR carbine, especially one with cylindrical grips rather than a RIS-railed one, is a really useful addition to any film simmer. Historical
an XM would be
collection.
fine.
Yeah.
Lots of XMs were used by Special Forces, including British ones as well. But I just thought this one's really flexible, and with the addition of the XM flash hider, you can retrofy
It's
it
pretty
even more.
versatile like that, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so a really nice gun. Highly recommended. Gadge, your next gun isn't here because it's had to go back to Frontline.
Yes. So for me, again, doing all the Cold War, film sim, that sort of stuff, either an L1A1 SLR or an FN-FAL are really useful.
Yep.
Not so much for other people perhaps, but I think they're one of those iconic firearms of the Cold War era.
Absolutely.
And again, no one's really going to know if you've got one or the other at the ranges we play Airsoft, where you can be everything from a paratrooper at the Falklands through to a Belgian Congo mercenary.
Or an Argentinian at the
Or in
Falklands.
Argentina at the Falklands, indeed, yeah. And I think that those battle rifle type airsoft guns are really undervalued and underused. I know they're quite cumbersome beasts, but I used to love seeing people running around with G3s and...
No, they're great. The VFC LAR, which is a very early FAL, is also a fantastic replica. There's a review of it on the channel right now. Really good fun to use, really good recoil, very gas efficient. My friend Dan was using it in a Welsh hillside in 8 degrees with rain, and it was still running.
Kicking out.
It was still kicking really well. It's a fantastic replica. It's very flexible. Yes, it's not a British L1A1. I would love VFC to do.
But do you know what? If you were doing a classic British loadout with that on the Airsoft Street, it's only people like you and I going to notice that.
If you change the flash hider, there's a few. There are some minor details. Certainly, if you change the flash hider and a couple of bits, you'll be able to get away with it. But I totally agree that an FAL or an L1A1, and again used by the entirety of the Commonwealth, and then with the FAL used by half the free world as their main battle rifle for 50 odd years, and they're still in service today. So it would be an absolutely fantastic replica. So this is the next one. Actually, this is probably one of the first I would get, which is an M16A1.
And again, it's got such a long pedigree. You can use it from anything but the earliest days of, well, actually the earliest days of Vietnam, all the way up to, I don't know, British Northern Islands type look.
Probably
Falklands
the
War
late
look.
90s.
Yeah.
They probably went out of service in the late 90s. They were in use with Commonwealth forces for jungle warfare and in places like Northern Ireland where they were small and handy. Obviously the US used them for a very long time.
Even police units used them in the US. And also, do you know what, look, as with your AK, if you're doing a, I don't know, gangsters and bank heist game or something like that, an old style M16 always looks cool. I mean, the A-Team had them as far as I remember, so like, if it's good enough for the A-Team, it's
Pretty
good
sure
enough for
some
me.
of the cops in Heat had an M16A1 when they were getting shot at. Used to be quite hard to get decent ones. Again, SEMA have really stepped up, and I got this one a couple of years back, and it's been brilliant for our impressions and also for games. It's not amazing. It's not amazing in terms of its performance, but you could upgrade it to your heart's content. But it has that really authentic look to it.
It's also got that classic silhouette that even your nan would recognise. You
Yep.
know, I think there are probably 2 or 3 firearms in the world what you could show your average man in the street and they go, that's an AK or that's an M16.
Yep.
You know, and there you go. And for me, even though I know later models might be more useful or better for other people, that triangular front grip is just, I think it's because I grew up as a kid in the 80s and my Action Man had one of these.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, so to me that is the Vietnam gun, you know.
Yep. So and it was in service for a good length of time with the US.
Reasonably long time,
and it's been was in service for a lot longer with the British, particularly with the Special Forces and again mountain warfare, cadres of the Royal Marines, and in the jungle where it was small and handy. So
And again, it's one of those things for me that if you were doing, let's say, a Black Hawk download out, even though it's not an M16A2, it doesn't look terrible at a game if you've got one. As long as it's an M16, it looks better than running around with, say, I don't know, an L1.
Yeah, you change
an SLR.
You change the handguards out, but
yeah,
most people wouldn't notice. So that would be my next pick, M16A1 Replica, or an, as it's colloquially known in Airsoft, an M16 VN, one of the earlier models of the M16. Always good choices, and then much more readily available now. It was for a long time very difficult to get. They're now really easy.
I think there's been that nice resurgence in retro replicas over the last couple of years. Because at one point, if it didn't have, I don't know, 18 yards of like res rail on it, people weren't interested. But now there's a real resurgence in classic carry handle models, older looking AKs, and World War II guns, which leads us on to our next. So a long time ago, I was fairly heavily involved with restarting. I won't say we started the World War II scene in Airsoft in the UK, because a few sites did do the odd game, but we were the first people to do a very big series of games with the community behind it, etc. And one of the big burdens we had at the time was that there weren't too many World War II guns. So we always said, as long as it's a brown stocked rifle, we don't mind that much. And over the time, we've just been spoiled for choice. We started off having Tanaka's K98, and then there were a few custom Lee Enfields. And now you can get absolutely lovely off-the-shelf Lee Enfields like the one we've shown recently.
Yep, and I'll roll some footage in. So that was the S&T SMLE.
Yep.
A really nice gun. It's currently tucked away, but it shot really well. It was fun to use. It was realistic enough, wasn't it? It's reenactor quality.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't. I would not feel unhappy having it over my shoulder at like a railway 1940s event or something like that. You know.
We've got a DIAC. I had it. You know, there's definitely differences compared to my DIAC, but it's close enough. Certainly from 5 metres away, most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You know, it's a really good gun.
And I just think that every airsofter should have a traditional like wood long rifle for those games where you've got to play the militia, or you're the irate farmer or something like that. You know, all those games where there are those civ pop or sort of militia or rebel type force things. And again, if you've got like a Car 98 or a Lee Enfield or whatever, it doesn't look terrible if you're playing Mujahideen in a Soviet-Afghan war game.
There's definitely pictures of both.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't look terrible if you're playing a modern Afghan type game.
No, there's probably still farmers walking around. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if I was going to choose 3 airsoft guns, I could only have 3.
Okay.
It would be the AKMS, the Vietnam M16A1 you mentioned, and probably a Lee Enfield of some sorts.
I think you'd be covered for, well, you would be covered for every time period.
Most of the 20th century.
From 1940 through to, in fact, 1910s with an SMLE, or a 1910s with an SMLE up to the modern day.
Would you make the same cut, do you think? Or?
I would go with an AKMS, a M16A1 carbine, particularly with my cunning sleeved XM flash hider. And I don't do a lot of World War. I would probably want an FN FOW.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. It's one of those things, isn't it, that the visual silhouette's really important to me. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be about right. Which is why I don't give a toss about pistols generally. Because a pistol's a stick at the top of my hand. By the time I'm using a pistol in the game, no one's seen it. It's normally in a pistol case.
And most historical pistol covers are fairly comprehensive anyway. You can only really see the pistol grip sticking out of it.
Exactly. Whereas if someone's coming at my patrol through the woods at a film sim game, if it's a platoon of Russians and we're playing the Brits, I kind of want them all to have AK-shaped things. I don't mind if it's a VZ58.
As long as it's got a banana mag.
Yeah, it's got a banana mag.
Roughly got the right sort of shape on the front.
Absolutely,
Yeah. I remember you talked about your World War II games. I remember when we started doing Vietnam games, and I was on the VC NVA side. I was on the Vietnamese side, world's largest NVA kernel. And the US guys were patrolling through the woods at first and only towards us. And it just looked amazing. Yeah. And they had a right variety of guns. They had M4s with carry handles on, and they scrimmed over any Riz rails. But it was the silhouette of that kind of classic AR silhouette and the M1 helmet.
Oh, the hell, it's the bowl
just
helmet.
looked amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it was like, wow. And now it's quite commonplace, but back then it was really rare to have 20, 30 guys all dressed the same. Just look great. So as you say, yeah, Gadge, it doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as the silhouette is roughly right, you can identify friend or foe and believe you're in that movie. Unlike a skirmish game where it's very hard to be convinced that you're actually fighting because you're fighting next to so many different types of people.
I like about a lot of the film sim games, and sorry to diverse on this, because as you mentioned, the helmets, everyone gets an extra hit with the helmet, so everyone tends to wear one unless they're daft. It's that helmet and mainly that rifle silhouette, because quite often you are shooting at shapes, and you're seeing a glimpse of someone through the foliage or whatever. And being able to get instant, oh, there are the VC, or there are the Germans, or there are the Afghans, or whatever.
Creating very distinct silhouettes.
Rather than going, oh, is that a glimpse of red armband? Or I'm not sure, maybe it's like something else. Oh no, he's got a bit of blue on him, shoot him,
I want to give an honourable mention before we disappear.
Okay, let's do it.
Because this is an M16A2, which actually are quite difficult to get now in the full rifle format. Someone needs to step up and start making them. And this one we've used in a few of our loadout videos. It's been really useful, particularly for the British.
I think quite a few people have seen that one before, if I recall.
But this one is. I'm not going to make any bold claims where it's been. It's definitely been on film. We can't say where because I don't have any certificates of authenticity. It was an ex-prop from a film studio in the UK. It's been reassembled from about 5 different ones. So it's about 5 different replicas in here.
But it's been on that film lot.
It's been on a film lot. Whether And you guys can imagine which films have used M16A2s, and make your own minds up. I got it for a nice price. I'm very happy with it, but it's actually been really useful for some of our British loadouts as well. The latest stuff that we've done, so it's come in pretty handy. So if you can get one, these are really useful for that. Just maybe add that extra 10, 20 years onto an M16A1, particularly if you're doing US loadouts because they stopped being used really in the mid 80s. Where an M16A2 means you can do more infantry or rangers in
I mean, that's good up to Gothic Serpent and then a bit later, isn't it? So,
well, there's still lots of guys had them in certainly Gulf War II and post into Afghanistan. If you weren't a frontline troop, you didn't need a Gucci gun. Lots of rear echelon guys were issued M16A2s because they didn't need the M4s with all the bits on. So it's a really useful gun again. And I think what we're trying to say is get something which can get really expensive doing historical airsoft if you buy a particular gun for a particular loadout. Gadge's L19A1 for one loadout is expensive. A £200 gun like this M16A2 or the M16A1 or the AK, you've got years and years and years, and you can do multiple loadouts with it.
That's why, as I said, I think if you've got a classic AK and a classic AR, not covered in accessory rails, etc., you're golden for pretty much no themed game organiser will turn you away if your gun's 5 years out of that time frame.
Yeah, second half of the 20th century, you covered both those guns really.
But if you want to play British Army of the Rhine and the only thing you have is, I don't know, an MP5, they might go, oh, you need to borrow a gun off somebody. It depends how fussy people are. I might allow an MP5 in a British force for Falklands or something like that, just because it's contemporary,
Probably was one there. Yeah. What's your favourite historical replica? Let us know down in the comments.
And I'd like to know which gun you've got the most use out of in your airsoft career.
Gadge, thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.